Hello everyone, what is up? Welcome back to another episode of Killer Instinct, you guys. Thank you so much for joining me here today. If you're new here, hi, my name is Savannah and I am your host of Killer Instinct. And before we get started, make sure you go ahead and hit that subscribe button. That way you never miss an episode. We post weekly here on the podcast every single Wednesday. You're not going to want to miss it. We also upload the video version onto YouTube on Wednesdays as well. So make sure you are subscribed. And with that being said, you guys, happy December. We are officially in a new month and the last month of 2024. As you may or may not be aware, we have been spending the year of 2024 dedicating each month to a different true crime category. Over the past 12 months, we have covered everything from serial killers to female killers to celebrity cases, unsolved cases, missing persons cases. Last month, we covered cases that occurred on or around Thanksgiving, and for this month, we are covering cases that have occurred on and around Christmas as well. We are covering Christmas cases for the month of December, and today's case is no different. As you guys can tell by the title of today's episode, today we are talking about the brutal family annihilation of the Daniels family. So with that being said, let's jump right on into it today. Now, this case actually takes place in a little town called Santa Claus, Georgia. This is an incredibly small town. It has a population of about 200 people. It's tucked away in Toombs County, Georgia. And as you can imagine, there is no shortage of Christmas spirit in this small town. For example, the family that we're talking about today, the Daniels family, lived on Dasher Street, named after one of the reindeer. But everyone puts out their decorations, their Christmas lights. The streets are lined with paper lanterns. There's a little center that kids will go and drop their letters off to Santa Claus. It really is a very festive area. Now, one of the 200 people that lived in Santa Claus was a man named Danny Daniels. Danny Daniels was born and raised in Santa Claus, and he worked as a mail carrier in the area. Danny was known to be a man of not very many words. He kept to himself. He was a little bit more private, but he was also incredibly intelligent. Danny had been a single father for many years and had a teenage daughter named Jessica. He was also a recovering alcoholic and had been in recovery for quite some time and was leaning on a local AA support group in the area, which is where he ended up meeting a woman named Kim Lamp. Kim had 3 children of her own, and together, Danny and Kim really leaned on each other. They grew close and formed a relationship. The two eventually got married in 1991 and blended their family and ended up even adding more kids into the mix when they decided to become a home for foster children as well. Kim had 3 children of her own as well. She had a son and 2 daughters, and over time, her and Danny grew a really close bond and a very strong relationship, and they ended up getting married in 1991 and blended their family. But Kim and Danny did not stop there because they ended up adding more kids into the mix when they decided to become a foster home for foster children. Now, this was something that was incredibly important to everyone in the Daniels family, but specifically Kim. This was her idea, and she wanted to be able to create a life for kids that she never had growing up. She wanted to create a home that could harbor memories and where kids could feel safe. She essentially wanted to give kids the experience that she never had. She wanted children to feel loved, and she wanted everyone to feel welcomed, especially in their home. So because of this, Kim and Danny had fostered many children over the years. So this was a house that was filled with a lot of love, a lot of laughter, and it was also filled with a lot of holiday spirit because Kim in particular, she loved the holidays, Christmas especially. Those who knew her said that she would start preparing for Christmas in February. She absolutely adored this holiday, and now adding kids into the mix, she wanted to be able to give them great memories of this holiday that she never had. So this case begins on the early morning hours of December 4th, 1997, and at this time, the Daniels had 7 children living in their home. They They had Danny and Kim's 4 children, Jessica, and then Kim's additional 3 children. And then they also had 3 foster children at the time. Now, at approximately 5 a.m. on December 4th, 1997, 911 dispatch in Bacon County received a phone call from a farmer who said that 3 young girls had been seen walking alone on the side of the road. And to give you reference, where the 3 young girls were found was about 40 miles away from the Daniels residence. Now, the farmer who called 911 said that the girls kept on saying that they were from Santa Claus. Police ended up meeting the girls where they were seen walking, and they were able to talk to the girls, who told them again where they lived, which is when police decided that they were going to get an officer to do a welfare check on the Daniels home. So the officer who conducted this welfare check was named Deputy Harlan, and he lived about 5 minutes away from the Daniels home, so it was easy for him to drive over to their residence. Now, when Deputy Harlan arrived, he walked up to the front door and noticed that the front door had been left open. He then walked into the home and noticed several things. The first thing that he noticed was that the alarm system had been beeping. There was also music playing from the radio in the distance, and he heard a baby crying. Deputy Harlan continued walking throughout the home, not knowing what he was going to find, but he did end up stopping once he walked past the dining room because he noticed a young boy hiding underneath the dining room table. Now, the boy that was hiding underneath the dining room table was one of Danny and Kim's foster children. And because this boy was so young, he wasn't able to properly articulate or verbalize where his parents were. But when Deputy Harlan asked him to show him where his parents were, that is when the young boy took Deputy Harlan by the hand and guided him to the primary bedroom. Now, at this point, Harlan told the young boy to stand back, and with his hand, he tried to open the primary bedroom door, but he realized that there was something on the other side that was blocking him from opening this door completely. And Harlan did not know what was on the other side of this door. He didn't know if it was their suspect trying to block him from entry. He didn't know if it was a piece of furniture, but with a little more pressure, he was able to get the door open. And when he did, he realized exactly what was jamming the door. And that, sadly, was the body of Danny's 16-year-old daughter, Jessica. But that wasn't all. When Deputy Harlan scanned the rest of the room, he discovered both Danny and Kim laying in bed from what was clear to have been a gruesome murder. After this discovery, Deputy Harlan then walked into the next bedroom, which is where he discovered Kim's 8-year-old son, Bryant, who had been murdered in his bed. And according to Deputy Harlan, he said that seeing Bryant murdered in his bed was the worst scene that he had ever witnessed in all of his years in law enforcement. So at this point, the police have 4 victims. They have Danny, Kim, Jessica, and Bryant, who all died from gunshot wounds. Danny and Kim died from multiple gunshot wounds. Jessica died from a close-range shot to her head, and Bryant also died from a close-range shot as well. Inside of Kim and Danny's bedroom was the crying baby that Harlan had originally heard when he walked inside of the house. So at this point, Deputy Harlan removed the baby from the crib and escorted the baby and the young boy outside and waited for backup to arrive. Now, when additional police arrived on the scene, they canvassed the home to make sure that their suspect was not hiding inside of the house. However, no one else was there. At the very beginning of this investigation, police did not know what to make of this murder. With Santa Claus being such a small town, this type of crime was not something that anyone was used to seeing. Murders did not happen in Santa Claus, let alone family annihilations, and police were trying to figure out what the possible motive could have been. They were also trying to understand how the 3 surviving daughters, Brooke, Amanda, and Amber, ended up 40 miles away. This was all still a very big mystery, but police were determined to get to the bottom of it. The officers at Toombs County Police Department, which was the department that was dispatched out to the Daniels home, they knew that they were going to need more resources and more officers in order to help solve this case. This really was an all hands on deck situation, and police departments from all surrounding areas contributed to help solving this case. Once the victims' bodies were removed and the house was officially named as a crime scene, police were able to canvass through the home and try and find any clues or evidence that could point them in the direction of their killer. Now, the first thing that police noticed was in the backyard of the home, there was actually a ladder that was leaned up against the house, and it was leaned up to the second story. And the second story window where the ladder was, that specific window was the bathroom on the second story. So police were able to theorize that this is how their killer gained entrance into the home, and this does show a sign of forced entry. Then inside of the home, there were also several other pieces of evidence found. There were cigarette butts, there were shell casings, and other fingerprints left at the scene that police were able to collect and send off to the lab in hopes that it would point them to their killer. Now, that evidence that was found, the cigarette butts, the shell casings, the ladder, it showed police that whoever was responsible for this crime was very messy. This was not someone who was meticulously making sure that they did not leave anything behind. Clearly, there were fingerprints, there was DNA. This was someone who was acting very erratically. Police also noticed when walking through the home that the gun cabinet that the Daniels had, that door to the gun cabinet had been left open and a semi-automatic shotgun had been missing, which police were able to again theorize that the shotgun that was missing more than likely was the gun that was used in the murder. Now, neighbors said that at 1:45 a.m. they did hear noises that resembled gunshots. However, they weren't exactly sure. So this did give police a little bit of a time frame to work with. Now, back at the police station, the three surviving girls, Brooke, Amanda, and Amber, were met with a woman from the Department of Child and Family Services to talk about what they remember happening on the early morning hours of December 4th. Now, at this point, the three girls did not know what had happened to their parents or about their other siblings, but 10-year-old Amber said the first thing that she remembered was being woken up in the middle of the night. Amber said that the man who woke her up in the middle of the night was very frantic and was telling her that her and her sisters needed to go with him because someone had broken into their family home and Danny, their dad, had been waiting for them at a friend's house. The man said that Danny, their father, had sent this specific guy to the home to gather the girls and bring them to where Danny was. So at this point, detectives asked Amber if she knew who this man was, if she could recognize him, and to their surprise, she did. Now, Amber said that she knew this man because he was a family friend. He had been around the house a lot, and she knew that his first name was Scott. Now, Scott had been to the house countless times, according to Amber. He was always playing with the kids, and because of the familiarity with Scott, Amber and her sisters were comfortable with going with him, and they really didn't question Scott because of it. Amber said that when she got out of bed, she told Scott that she was going to change out of her pajamas, but Scott insisted that there wasn't enough time and that they needed to go and get out of the house right then and there. So at that point, Amber and her sisters got into Scott's car with him, and he began driving. Amber then said that after about a half hour, he parked the car underneath a bridge, and Amber said that this is where she started to feel like something was wrong. At this point, Scott then looked at Amber and demanded Amber to take off her clothes. Again, Amber remembers feeling confused and scared. She began crying, but Scott told her that if she didn't stop crying, he would also hurt her other sisters who were in the car as well. So because of that threat, Amber stopped. She remembered seeing a knife in Scott's boot and a gun on the ground of the car, so she knew that he could hurt them if he wanted to. So at this point, she said she did what Scott said and stayed still as Scott molested and raped Amber in his car. Afterwards, the four continued driving in silence before Scott stopped the car again alongside of a dirt road. Once he stopped the vehicle, Scott told the girls that they needed to get out of the car because he was going to visit with an older woman who didn't like kids. That is what he told them. Now, when the three of them got out of the car, Scott said to wait there because he would be back in 5 minutes. But once the car was out of sight, Amber, Brooke, and Amanda then ran for their lives. Again, at this point, they knew that something was very, very wrong, and they did not want any chance of Scott coming back and taking them again. So they ran, and that is when the farmer found them. So even though police had a first name to work with, they had the name Scott. That was it. They did not know what Scott's last name was. They didn't know if Scott was a nickname. They didn't know where Scott lived or where he worked. They didn't know any of it. So now they really had to put the pieces of this puzzle together. And while that was happening, detectives continued to speak with Amber, and they asked her if she knew of anyone who would want to hurt her or her family or her parents, or any odd instances that she could recall from over the years. And Amber actually did. Amber remembered one instance with a woman named Latrell Mosley. Latrell happened to be the biological mother of one of the children that Kim was fostering about 2 years prior, and that child's name was Joanne. Now, certain foster kids did have visitations with their parents, and Kim, like I mentioned earlier, she welcomed everyone into her home. Kim really wanted to be an inspiration for a lot of these parents who were struggling, because she wanted these parents to see that she has also been through hard times, but she was able to get through them and make it out onto the other side and make a better life for her and her kids. So she was very welcoming because of that. So it was really important for Kim to have these conversations with these parents, and that is what she was doing with Latrell. And again, this was about 2 years prior to the murders, but she remembers an instance when Latrell had come over to the Daniels home to have a conversation with Kim. And according to Amber, she said the only things that she really remembers about Latrell was the fact that she was tall and she had long, dark hair. Now, the instance that Amber does recall was when Latrell came into the home and had a conversation with Kim. Something had happened that had caused this conversation that Kim and Latrell were having to go very, very south, and it ended up with Latrell storming out of the home and performing some sort of a ritual in the front yard that appeared to have involved black magic. Now, because this is such a small town, when something like this happens, a lot of the neighbors end up finding out about it. They see it, and many neighbors witnessed what Latrell was doing, so they also saw what was going on, and everyone was very shocked by her behavior, but ultimately Latrell did leave. Now, because of this, even though it was 2 years prior, police did think that it was worth having a conversation with Latrell. They really were trying to turn over every stone at this point. So police were able to sit down with Latrell, and when they did, she explained that the Daniels were fostering her daughter Joanne, and Latrell was always welcome to go and visit Joanne whenever she wanted. And she also mentioned that many times she would bring her son along with her. Latrell had an older son named Jerry. Jerry was 18 years old at this time, and what police learned through speaking with Latrell and also talking to people who knew the Daniels family, they learned that Jerry very quickly grew an infatuation and an obsession with Daniel's daughter, Jessica. And Jessica was around 14 years old at the time. And like I said, Jerry was 18. And Kim and Danny picked up very quickly Jerry's infatuation. On one occasion, things ended up escalating so badly that Jerry showed up to the house unannounced and uninvited, trying to see Jessica. At this time, Kim was home, and she called Danny, who was out at work at the time. And when Danny came back to the home, he found Jerry in the front yard. Him and Jerry exchanged words, and Danny told Jerry that he was not allowed to come back to their home. So with this information, police decided that they want to speak with Jerry, who is now 20 years old. Now, prior to going into this conversation, police wanted to look into any information that they possibly could in regards to Jerry. They kind of wanted to get an understanding of him before going into this conversation. And when they did this, they were able to see that Jerry had been arrested for a DUI. And in this report, Jerry's full name was listed, which is Jerry Scott Heidler. Now, When police saw this, their suspicions raised, red flags were going off because they found it to be very coincidental that Jerry's middle name was Scott, which was the name of the man that they were looking for based off of Amber and what she had told them. Now, this is when police started to wonder, was this really just a coincidence or did they just find Scott? And to confirm their suspicion, police brought Jerry's mugshot to Amber, Brooke, and Amanda, and they asked the girls if this was the man that they were referring to, if this was the man that had kidnapped them. And that is when Amber, Brooke, and Amanda all three confirmed that Jerry was the man who abducted them. So, with this information, police are believing it is very likely that Jerry and Scott are the same person. So, with this, police obviously now want to speak to Jerry. So, they drove to Bacon County where Jerry was living. But when police arrived to his home, Jerry was not there. So, they kept some officers at Jerry's house just to keep surveillance on the home in case Jerry were to come back. And several other officers drove to Latrell's house, which was also in Bacon County. They figured that if Jerry wasn't at his own home, he very well likely was at Latrell's. So they drove over to Latrell's home, and their suspicions were correct because inside of the house was Jerry. When Jerry realized that the police were right outside of the door, he tried to run out of the back of the home and escape. He actually ended up crawling underneath the crawl space of the home, but police did find him under there and they arrested him. Jerry was charged with 4 counts of murder, 3 counts of kidnapping, and 1 count of burglary. And when Jerry sat down with police during his interrogation, police were actually surprised, but pleasantly surprised to hear that Jerry was not holding anything back. He was very willing to talk at this time. Upon sitting down, Jerry confessed that he was the one who murdered the Daniels family as well as kidnapped the other girls. Jerry actually described the murder as being like a quote unquote dream to him. He used this dream analogy to explain that everything felt like it was in a fog. The whole entire murder, the sequence of events felt very foggy to him. He felt like it was more of an out of body experience. And he did go on to tell police that on the early morning hours of December 4th, he broke into the Daniels home through that bathroom window. Now, Jerry did say that his main motive of this was to kidnap Jessica and take her with him. That was the entire motive of being there. That is why he went to the Daniels home in the first place. However, when he arrived and came face to face with Jessica, Jessica refused to go with him. Jessica then started to run towards her parents' bedroom, and this is when Jerry grabbed one of Danny Daniels' own guns out of his own gun cabinet and went charging after Jessica through the home. Like I said, Jessica ran into her parents' bedroom where she was later found. This was an attempt to get to safety, but that is when Jerry shot Jessica at a point blank range. Now, obviously, these gunshots then woke up Kim and Danny, but everything happened so quickly and they were shot dead right then and there as well. Jerry then went next door into Brian's bedroom and murdered him. And when police asked Jerry why he did not kill everyone in the home, why he left survivors behind, he said it was because he ran out of shells for the gun. He also explained that he threw that specific gun in the river after leaving the home, which all 3 of the surviving girls did confirm. Now, after getting some answers out of Jerry, police then sent him to prison where he was awaiting his trial because once Jerry got a lawyer, he did try to retract his confession. And so because of that, this case went to trial. And then 6 months later, while awaiting for his trial, Jerry ended up escaping prison. He actually cut the jail cell bar with some sort of a tool and was able to break out of the jail cell and escape. Now, this was obviously very unsettling for everyone involved because people knew what Jerry was capable of. Everyone was on edge because of this. No one knew if he was going to try and get retaliation for any survivors. No one knew if he was going to go on a murdering spree. So again, this was an all hands on deck situation, and everyone was trying to track down Jerry. There were alerts being put out to every news station and every radio station. Police wanted to make sure that the general public was aware that Jerry was on the loose. But luckily, police later received a phone call from someone claiming to have seen Jerry walking alongside of the highway. So, police drove to this specific location, and luckily they were able to locate Jerry. But when Jerry saw the police, he did try and run. He tried to escape again, but when the police pulled out their guns onto Jerry, he immediately dropped to the ground and he was arrested and transported back to jail. On August 30th, 1999, Jerry's trial began, and it was during the trial that multiple other findings were revealed. It was revealed that after the murders and after Jerry had dropped off Amber, Amanda, and Brooke on the early morning hours of December 4th, Jerry had driven back to his mom Latrell's house. He slept for some time and then played video games with his brother. During playing video games with his brother, Jerry had asked his brother if his brother had ever killed anyone, to which his brother replied no, and Jerry told his brother that killing, quote unquote, gives you a rush and makes you want to go out and kill more people. Now, there was some physical evidence that was brought out during the trial as well, and all physical evidence that was found at the crime scene, the fingerprints, the saliva on the cigarette, all of it came back as a direct DNA match to Jerry. Now, after a 3-day trial and only 20 minutes of deliberation, Jerry was convicted on 4 counts of malice murder, kidnapping, aggravated child molestation, and burglary, and he was sentenced to death. Following his conviction, Jerry has attempted multiple times to get his case appealed. He has met with mental health experts who have diagnosed him with borderline personality disorder. And even though he is guilty, his defense has been trying to argue that he is mentally ill and that he wasn't fit to stand trial, so his case should be appealed. But the courts have rejected his appeal each time. So we will have to wait and see what ends up happening with this case. I will keep you guys updated, but please let me know what you think in the comments below. And with that being said, you guys, that is going to be all for me today. Thank you so much for tuning in to another episode of Killer Instinct. Again, if you're new here, hi, my name is Savannah. I'm your host of Killer Instinct. Before you exit out, make sure you go ahead and hit that subscribe button. That way you never miss an episode. We post weekly here on the podcast every single Wednesday. You're not going to want to miss it. I'll be back next week with a brand new one for you guys. And until then, stay safe. Bye, guys.